Hello third graders, this is Mrs. Copeland and I'm a math teacher in Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools. I'm going to be helping you with third grade memory joggers. Let's take a look at week 10, day 4, problem D. Show 1/2 on this number line. Show both 1/2, 2, 3, and 4 on this number line. We have a couple things to remember. Fractions are numbers and can be placed on a number line. We can determine how a number line is partitioned by counting the number of equal parts between 0 and 1, or between any two whole numbers. So on the first number line, we see 0 and 1 here. And if we count the number of equal parts, we would see there are 2 equal parts. So we know this number line is counting by halves. 0 halves, 1/2, 2 halves. Notice the numerator and denominator are the same when we get to 1. That will always happen on any number line when you're at 1. The numerator and denominator should be equal to each other. Then when we look at this number line, if we were to count all the way across, we would say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 parts. And we might think we're counting by eighths. But that's not what this number line is counting by. We have to look very closely for the two whole numbers. Here's 0 and here's 1. So we always count just between 0 and 1. So if we were counting the equal parts on this number line, there would be 1, 2. So we would have 0 halves, 1/2, 2 halves. And just on a quick note right here, so notice that 2 halves, the numerator and denominator are the same. But also I want you to think about the fact that here one whole is this long and here one whole is this long. So anytime you compare two fractions, you need to make sure that you're talking about the same whole. Because if I were to say, which is longer, half of this line or half of that line? Clearly half of this top line is much bigger because the whole is much bigger. So you always need to know how big your whole is when you're comparing, but we're not really comparing here. I just wanted to think about that for a moment. Okay, so we know that we're counting by halves. We have 0 half, 1/2, 2 halves. We could keep going. 3 halves, 4 halves, 5 halves, 6 halves, 7 halves, and 8 halves. But our problem tells us to label 1/2, which we did. I can put a star there. And to label 2, 3, and 4. So if I'm thinking about this, what I have to think about is how many halves is it going to take me to get to the next whole number? How many halves is it going to take me to get to the next whole number? We can see it takes 1, 2 halves to make a whole number. So every 2, there's going to be another whole number. So here's 1. 1/2, 2, I'm at another whole number. 1/2, 2 halves, so I'm at another whole number. 1/2, 2 halves, I'm at another whole number. Remember down here where it said we can tell how a number line is counting by the number of equal parts between 0 and 1 or between any two whole numbers? Notice there's 2 equal parts between 0 and 1. There's 2 equal parts between 1 and 2, 2 equal parts between 2 and 3, and 2 equal parts between 3 and 4. So really it wouldn't have mattered if you'd counted the number of equal parts if 2 had already been labeled between 1 and 2 to find out that it was counting by halves. Okay, and we were supposed to label 2, 3, and 4. I'm just starring them because I labeled a lot more than what we had to. Thank you, and if you have additional questions about this problem, please ask your classroom teacher.